Hello everyone, Chen here. Today we're talking about the 8 different postures, right? In what I call the 8 elements of the Shaolin, right? And so they're the basic 8 stances that we use all the time in Shaolin Kung Fu. Not to be confused with Wushu, which is kind of a different use of the stances, but in the Kung Fu, you're actually usually up a little bit higher in the stances to be able to use them effectively with power, where with Wushu you go so low that even though it looks cool, it's just kind of useless for power, right? And so the reason why I bring that up is with Gong Bu, which is our bow stance or forward stance. That's the next one that we're going to talk about. And in the 8 element, I call this stance thunder, right? And I believe that's Chen in the Chinese, because thunder is basically, to me, it's bringing up the energy from the ground and shooting it forward, right? So we're kind of projecting power, and so that's why I think of that stance as thunder. And so it actually kind of fits that idea of shooting outward. Okay, so with Gong Bu, again, it's kind of like taking the Mabu stance, right, and that bent knee, and just kind of shifting to one side, because in Mabu we can actually just turn and we drill the knee into the ground, and it becomes a straight leg into the ground, no heel up, foot's flat on the ground, right? And we don't blade, meaning that our waist or our chest is to the side. We actually go forward, and so that part of the hip turns, so we have a forward chest with Gong Bu. Okay, so again with Gong Bu, we're taking the power from the knee and we're shooting that forward. Okay, so back is straight, we don't angle too far forward. Okay, and it's basically known that it's about 70% is on the front leg, 30% is on the back. But it might actually feel more like 50-50. Because I think it's better to be back a little bit in Gong Bu and not leaning forward too much, right? So with Gong Bu, we want to have the back foot at a 45-degree angle. The front foot is not straight, but turned in just slightly. Because what that does is it kind of keeps the foot and the knee from being pulled forward if we have it turned in slightly. It gives us more of a cutting feeling if we're pulled forward, right? We have a little more stability that way. And so with thunder or Gong Bu, Chen, it's the idea of, like I said, projecting forward. And so when I do the drills with this from one stance to the next, I'll often use what I call the shield formation. And they use this a lot in Tai Chi, where they'll have an angle arm, 90-degree angle, and they'll put a palm behind it. Okay, so the arm that is on the same side as the straight leg behind is your power arm in Gong Bu. Okay, so that's your power. As you sink the knee and shoot forward, then that's your power coming forward. Okay, and so we'll use that arm on the back of this shield to allow this shield to have power. And then this allows us to push an opponent without hurting them, and to kind of see how much power we can generate in this stance. Okay, so in other martial arts, sometimes they'll be too high in Gong Bu, right? Or they'll be way low in Gong Bu. Okay, and either one of those is kind of bad. And so when you have somebody push against your shield, you have somebody with both hands kind of pressing against your shield. Then when you get into Gong Bu, you can feel from that pressure about right where you need to be. you know, the angle in your front leg, your back leg, because you'll match that pressure easily without having to use much force, right? And so if you go too low, you get pressed back this way or pulled forward, right? And if you're up too high, then your back leg, you get pushed back because your back leg doesn't give you enough of a brace, right, for that power. So what will happen is you'll have somebody push against you and you'll get a little bit lower, settle a little bit lower, and you'll find that sweet spot right where you'll match their power, and you're using structure and not muscle, right? And then that's the level of your Gong Bu or your bow stance, okay? Now bow stance is usually used, you know, we'll be in a forward stance, we might deflect something to the side, and then bow stance is how we project forward, okay? So with bow stance or Gong Bu, we can project forward with both hands. We can use our power hand that matches the rear leg, or the power hand to punch, right? But we can also use the other hand if we link up the power hand to it, right? Then this has the stability from the power hand. And sometimes you'll see a lot of Shaolin Kung Fu where they'll have what looks like a Wushu, but they're actually adding power to this front fist, which only has really arm power, right? But then they add the power of the body to that. Okay, so quite often you'll see a palm supporting that front fist. Okay, so with Gong Bu, there are quite a few ways to get that power to project forward. Okay, and so sometimes you'll see an open hand block with a punch. Sometimes you'll see a arm moving and making kind of an angle triangle block to protect the head as the other hand punches. Okay, and then that can go either way. Okay, sometimes you'll see in Shaolin where they'll divide the energy. You know, they'll step right into an opponent and maybe block a kick and a punch and divide the energy. Okay, and so you'll see that moving like this. Okay, and sometimes you'll see the front hand go forward, but the back arm go back. And with Shaolin Kung Fu, they want to use more body power instead of just arm power, okay? Arm and shoulder power. They want to use the whole body as power, moving through the stances and using the stances to give the body power, right? So there's an interesting kind of leverage that's used in these stances where they'll actually pull one arm down to help the other arm on top have more leverage. Or if they're moving one arm out, they'll use another arm back. And it's not just to be fancy, like, you know, a Tai Chi pose, right? But it's meant for leverage. Because you'll find you only have so much power if you do this, but you have about a third more power when you have an arm go behind or coming around into Mabu and down. You'll find that this arm moving down actually has more power by another arm moving up. So there's this power coming outward, kind of from both sides. Okay, but with Gong Bu, it's mainly about projection. Okay, so the other stances might be coiling, and then the Gong Bu is projecting. And then when we're done projecting, usually we'll come back into another stance where we're not so far forward, right? Because when you go forward, in front of someone, then they can maybe block the arms and attack this forward leg, right? So that's why we want to have an empty leg when we're moving in, and when somebody's right here, we use the Gong Bu almost to step through the person's legs and to go through them, but not like the Kung Fu movies where they're punching in front of somebody. It's basically coming in and almost being hip to hip with somebody and then using Gong Bu. Because then that front leg is so close and it's going through them that they can't sweep that leg out or attack that leg, right? So anyway, those are some tips on Gong Bu, or the forward stance, and kind of how to find the level so you're not up too high, you're not down too low, but you're just right, so then you can transform into empty, into horse stance, Ma Bu, Zhu Bu, you know, Li Bu, and so on. So thanks again for joining me.